Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Today, our guest is Dr. Shawna Darou, a naturopathic doctor, functional medicine practitioner, and host of the podcast Unstoppable at Any Age. With more than 20 years in clinical practice, she brings a really grounded, practical lens to women's health in midlife.
Dr. Darou challenges the idea that what we're feeling is just aging or something we have to accept. Instead, she helps us understand what's really going on with insulin, blood sugar, muscle, stress, and what it actually takes to feel strong and stable again. Welcome, Shawna. So happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk about metabolic health and perimenopause, midlife, all of those things.
Yes, us too. We like to talk about it a lot.
Yeah. And there's so many different opinions about it. And so you've been in clinical practice for more than 20 years. What first drew you to women's health, and how has your focus evolved over time?
That's a great question. So, yeah, I've been practicing for 22 years now, and this is a second career. I used to be an engineer first. So it took me a little while to find my way, but it ended up being a great thing to be graduating in my early 30s because I had enough life experience to kind of dive right in. So my practice has always been women's health, partly interest and honestly partly safety. My first clinic was in an alleyway in Queen West area, and it felt a lot better to promote to women at that time. So my passion kind of grew. I started with a ton of work with fertility. That was what I was most known for in the first, probably 5 to 10 years of practice. And then as I've gotten older, my practice has too. So I'm usually just a few years ahead of the majority of my patients. And, now that I'm post-menopause, I feel very comfortable and confident working with perimenopause and that enormous hormone and life transition that entails. So that's more what I'm known for right now. And, the interest in metabolic health has always been there. I think I've talked about insulin resistance for 20 years, but I didn't realize how big it was as our hormones start to shift in perimenopause. So I always say that menopause is a metabolic transition because this part of it is as big as the estrogen changes.
So it kind of flows into my next question, actually. Like your earlier work focused more on the hormones, although it still does now. But now you speak a lot
Yes.
about metabolic health, movement, longevity. What shifted for you clinically? Was it like your own personal evolution? Was it what you were seeing in your clients?
So I've always been working with blood sugar issues. Like this is something that I think I picked up on maybe ahead of the curve in terms of talking about insulin resistance. And the way that that would show up in terms of patients would usually be resistant weight loss, like difficulty losing weight or the body's not responding like it used to. And, this is generally a lifestyle condition. If you're eating too many carbohydrates and sugar and not moving enough, then it's going to catch up to you. And for most people, it's just a matter of when. Some people genetically can tolerate that for many more years than others. Women with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, that sensitivity kicks in as a teenager usually. So in those cases, we have to have those discussions like long before hormones start to shift in perimenopause. So I think just because I've always had a downtown practice and our lifestyle tends to be sedentary, it's been something that's been on my radar for a long time. And then during the pandemic, it just exploded. Like the combination of being more sedentary, being really stressed, eating more comfort food, and drinking more alcohol really turned on metabolic dysfunction for thousands and thousands of people.
And you often talk about how women who stay strong and independent are the ones who keep moving. Is that when the pattern became clear to you during the pandemic?
I mean, the pandemic was a perfect storm of like everything going wrong at the same time. So, we put sleep and stress in with change in dietary habits and being, inactive. So I don't think the movement piece really, got into me, honestly, until I got more focused on movement myself, and seeing how much of an impact it has on blood sugar regulation, and then learning about movement as probably the biggest longevity lever that we have. It surpasses all of the supplements that you could name. It surpasses dietary changes, and it's something that we have access to. So there are studies that show both directions, both your cardiorespiratory fitness being a really accurate longevity marker. So the more fit you are, basically, in terms of like running, cycling, walking up hills, that type of thing, the slower your body ages. And also, the more muscle you have, the stronger you will be as you age as well. But there are also brain implications with both of those as well. Because of my own family history and what I'm seeing in my family, I'm really passionate and focused in on dementia and Alzheimer's prevention and brain health. And, being fit and having muscle are two of the biggest things that you can do to reduce your risk of that, or at least push it down the road.
You're also a competitive athlete. So, how has your experience shaped the way that you think about women's health in midlife when it comes to movement?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story because I didn't really think of myself as an athlete until 49. And I think I've always been active and relatively fit. Like I have a body that needs to move. But what that looked like in my 30s was walking to work and doing an occasional exercise class. In my 40s, I added yoga in, but it was still walking to work and an occasional run. And then in my late 40s, I guess during the pandemic, I started running, maybe a little bit before that, but it's become something that I'm very attached to right now as part of my identity. And it's, created a lot of, opportunity for community and, has made a huge shift in confidence within my body as well. So I consider myself a competitive athlete right now because I enjoy it. It doesn't have to be a competitive activity for anybody. That just lights me up. I didn't realize how competitive I was until I started racing at 50.
Really funny. Maybe there's still a competitive streak in me that just haven't found yet, and I'll hit it in a few years. I'm like the least competitive, least athletic person.
I honestly didn't know. Like I had never really pushed myself to that level before. And I think once you get uh, some competence, the competitiveness can grow out of that. And the thing that I love about being a masters athlete is that, you know, the times become more realistic. It's not like trying to be like an Olympian in your 20s. If you stay relatively fit over time, you can actually do quite well in your age category. And I actually find that super motivating. I can't wait to turn 55 to be in my next age category next spring.
I wonder if they'll let me into the 55 category. That'd be really motivating.
Well, that's how I got in the Boston
Uh,
Marathon was because the times get easier to achieve every 5 years. So, the qualifying time at 50 seemed doable compared to the
yeah.
qualifying time at
Oh, that's
30.
so funny.
Yeah.
So you now lead Women Who Move and you're the host of the Unstoppable at Any Age podcast. What conversation did you feel like was missing for women, let's say over 40, that you wanted to create with these?
Well, the Women Who Move has just stemmed from my observation that movement is our biggest longevity lever again. Like if I could make an impact with my career, I feel like getting women moving would have the biggest impact of anything that I could do. So I'm not a personal trainer or a coach. I defer to other, experts in terms of the how-to part, but the motivation and, the information about how it impacts how we age on every level. So in terms of, maintaining our independence through life, in terms of reducing our risk of, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, but also reducing our risk of osteoporosis and Alzheimer's. So all of the things that get us depend on movement. And that can be adapted to whatever our ability or health is. It's not something that has to be running marathons for everybody. If that lights me up, it doesn't have to light you up. Um, so that's where that came from. I guess at the age and stage of my career where impact means a lot to me. And the podcast is something I've been thinking and dreaming up for a couple of years. The way that my brain works is that when I get inspired by somebody else, it just plants a seed of possibility. So every time I take on a challenge, I look to see who's done it before me and done it better. And to the same degree, if I hire a coach for the sports that I do, I really love working with someone who's older than me and faster than me, right? Like, then I'll just listen to whatever they say. And also, I will trust that they understand that an older body can't train at the same capacity as a 30-year-old, that, down weeks and rest periods and recovery and all of that are just as important as the training itself. And I know that they'll take my crazy dreams seriously.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that's amazing.
So that's what the podcast is for, is just like telling stories about women who are doing things that you may not believe are possible. So, I've interviewed a few women in their 70s who are still racing, like internationally, but also, women who are redefining what their life looks like, or taking on a new career, or, whose lives have fallen apart by accident and had to reinvent themselves. So again, it's just planting seeds of possibility that our life isn't over, and that, you still can take on a big dream at
That's
any
me. I
age.
became a therapist at 43. I went back and did my master's and like when
Exactly.
I was 41.
I need to interview you too.
I mean, born out of huge life change that that's why I did it. It's true. You can do it.
So again, the more of these stories that we hear, the more it gives us permission,
Yeah.
basically, to do something that, maybe is not the common or the norm of just following a career path through life. And I feel like movement is the same thing. Like, the more we see that we're capable of, because, the studies show that we don't actually, fitness wise, age until our 70s. Like, our potential and possibility is still there. And for me, that's just incredible. Like, there are so many examples of, competitive masters runners who didn't get back into sport until late 40s or even late 60s that, are doing extremely well. And for me, I think it's a competitive advantage, because I don't have any old injuries from
Right.
overtraining in my 20s or 30s. It's like starting with a fresh body.
When people hear metabolic health, they may think it means weight. How do you define metabolic health?
That's a really great question. So there's a medical definition, and then I can give you examples of what that looks like. So metabolic dysfunction is a medical term that refers to a change in your blood sugar, so rising blood sugar, or on your lab results, that might be something called hemoglobin A1C, which is an average of your fasting glucose for 3 months. It will be a rise in your total cholesterol and low HDL, so the good cholesterol, and high triglycerides, the fat in the blood, and a change in blood pressure. So if any of those factors are starting to shift on your blood work, usually that will show up as a change in weight on the scale. But sometimes the blood work changes before we see much movement in body composition. And personally, I don't like focusing on weight, because I find that that's an outdated goal, and it tends to put us back into diet mentality of the 80s and 90s. So I like focusing on things like muscle mass and, again, the blood work, like getting our levels in our cholesterol panel and our blood sugar into optimal ranges. Because the reason that metabolic dysfunction is so important is that I've seen that this is central to the onset of a lot of the diseases that we associate with aging. So obviously diabetes, and then heart disease and stroke, but also it changes our risk in terms of Alzheimer's and osteoporosis even. So if we can work on optimizing our metabolic function, especially in midlife and 40s and 50s, it's going to change the trajectory of how we age.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some early signs of metabolic dysfunction that we tend to overlook?
In a lot of cases, there will be a change in body weight, but especially gaining weight around the middle, especially if that's not been your pattern before. So if, through your 40s, you're noticing that you're starting to put on some belly weight that you didn't have, that often is a sign of metabolic dysfunction beginning. Another one that's really common is sleep disruption. because our bodies require stable blood sugar through the night, and that starts to get out of balance early with metabolic dysfunction. And then another one that is common is brain fog as well. So brain fog, there's a lot of other causes as well, but that, fits in the constellation. So unexplained weight gain, getting tired after meals, being more hungry and having a lot of food noise. So thinking about eating a lot, fatigue, especially in the afternoon, sleep disruption, more cravings. It can affect your menstrual cycle, but that would be more in the cases if you have a susceptibility to polycystic ovarian syndrome. Mood swings, difficulty concentrating. And I know this is like a really broad description of symptoms, and they're very, very common, but I think of pattern recognition. So if I see more than a few of these in one person, that's the first place that my brain goes, is what's going on with the person's blood sugar.
So where does insulin resistance fit in?
So what insulin resistance is an overproduction of insulin in response to the carbohydrates that you're eating. Insulin is a storage hormone. We need it. If you're type 1 diabetic, you don't have it, and it's life-threatening. But for those of us who are not type 1 diabetic, we should produce a proportionate amount of insulin to the carbohydrates that we have to utilize them properly. If you've been overdoing carbohydrates for too many years, meaning, breads and pastas and sugars and sweets, without enough exercise and not enough protein, then your insulin level is going to start to climb. And insulin resistance means there's too much insulin, which puts your body into a state of storage of body fat constantly until we reverse it. It creates a lot of food noise, meaning thinking about eating, wondering what's happening for your next meal, feeling very anxious if you don't know where your food's coming from. And it does create a lot of cravings, meaning you're likely to eat more than your body needs physiologically because your body's in the state of feeling like it needs more because you're going to starve. Insulin brings down your glucose too rapidly. So when it drops, your drive is to eat more. So the constant needing to snack through the day is often a sign of insulin resistance as well.
I'm assuming if we have poor metabolic health, we can reverse this?
Okay. 100%. Yes. Yes. So this is all reversible. There are cases where it gets really extreme, where fasting insulin is very, very high and somebody is, very obese, where medications are probably necessary. But for most people where the dysfunction is mild to moderate, this is a lifestyle condition, and it can be reversed with changes in how you eat and adding more movement in. I'm very anti-diet and anti-diet culture. This is lifestyle changes that are slow and gradual, meaning we're not expecting radical results in 2 or 3 months. We're expecting a gradual shift in not just body weight, but body composition. So more muscle, less body fat, especially around the middle, more energy, more muscle. And this strategy is likely to have a long-term positive impact on health rather than trying to do it radically. Technically, you could reduce it a lot quicker with a radical diet, with stopping your carbohydrates, with a lot of fasting, or with a medication. But those methods are not very sustainable because you're not actually teaching your body how to live differently.
I was just about to ask you what your opinion is on GLP-1s. And my guess, but I would love to hear, is that there's a place for them when you're talking about like when the metabolic health is like that there's a lot of obesity present, or a lot of the markers are, it's been a long time coming in terms of the metabolic decline. But I'm curious your opinion on them.
I have a lot of opinions. I'm not against them, first of all. They are life-saving medications. And again, in cases where things are extreme, the lifestyle changes are not fast enough to reverse it, to save someone's life. And also, sometimes the body really does get stuck when it's that out of balance. That's not the majority of people, though. There are obviously benefits of GLP-1s in terms of helping the body to get a more stable glucose response over a period of time. But there are risks associated with it as well. And I don't feel that people are using them in the best possible way or don't have the right education to use them if they're choosing to go that route. Number one, to use it for a short amount of time to come off of it and maintain the gains that they've had, but also to not create more problems along the way. My biggest concern is that with the drop in appetite, it does, number one, slow down your metabolism, which is hard to regain again. And number two, you will lose muscle unless you're being very, very careful to keep it on your body and build it. And it's harder to eat enough protein when you're on a GLP-1 with a reduced appetite to be able to do that. I'm most afraid of women going on them during perimenopause and menopause, especially when estrogen starts to drop, because we are at major risk of drop of bone density during that time. And it's a perfect storm. If you lose muscle, you're not eating enough, and you're going through menopause all at one time, you're putting yourself at very high risk of osteoporosis, which is, to me, a scarier risk than being a little bit overweight during that time period.
Okay.
So women literally lose 20% of their bone density in the first 5 years post-menopause if we don't do something about it. And that can get accelerated if you're not eating enough, not getting your movement in, or losing muscle mass during that same period.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And it brings me to the next question. Like, I think a lot of women in their 40s feel like their body is not responding anymore to the same habits, which may prompt them actually to use GLP-1s. Why do so many women feel like their bodies suddenly stop responding to the same habits they were doing before?
Yeah, we have to be more fine-tuned with our habits in this phase. So, like I said at the beginning, menopause is a metabolic transition as well as an estrogen change. As estrogen starts to fluctuate, our bodies become a lot more sensitive to these blood sugar swings. And if we don't have the right habits in place, then metabolic dysfunction kicks in very, very easily in this time period. This is the main reason that women gain weight. And, if you sort of go back to the symptoms I described for metabolic dysfunction, they're all of what we say for perimenopause. So weight gain, brain fog, sleep disruption, mood swings, energy swings, all of those things are, in my opinion, a sign that your metabolic function needs some support. And this blood sugar sensitivity that happens at that time, you don't even need to be overweight or insulin resistant to feel it. So I learned this myself around 48 when I put on a glucose meter, so a continuous glucose meter, which I use a lot in my practice, just to learn how to use it more. I wasn't expecting to learn anything because that was at the start of being quite athletic. I was not overweight, but I had a lot of perimenopause symptoms. I wasn't sleeping. I was craving carbs all the time. I was more anxious. I had a lot of night sweats. And what I found was that my blood sugar was up and down like a yo-yo. And again, because my weight wasn't my issue, I didn't think it was blood sugar. I learned so much with that first 2 weeks of a glucose meter about how important it was to get enough protein with my meals, that a lot of my carby snacks weren't working, that I wasn't fueling my workouts enough or getting enough carbohydrates in after an endurance workout. And again, the protein was the game changer with it, getting enough protein and steadily through the day. So it really drives the symptoms at that time. So when I'm talking with a woman in perimenopause, the way that I frame it is that your body is changing and all the rules have changed, but there is a roadmap.
Mm.
So what worked in your 30s probably won't work in your 40s unless you've already learned the blood sugar insulin resistance piece early on, in which case you're probably going to breeze through it anyways. So we have to really hone in on really the basic lifestyle habits that you probably hear everywhere online: getting enough protein, walking after your meals, putting on muscle, not overdoing the sugar and sweets, prioritizing sleep, stress management. And I know it all sounds really basic. In fact, my son makes fun of me. He thinks my work is so simple. He says, "How many women today did you tell to eat more protein and go for a walk?" And the answer is always lots. And there's more to it than that. But like the basics make a huge difference.
It's really funny. That's actually my goal today, is to eat more protein and go for a walk.
Right?
Yeah.
It's mine too.
So just a quick question about the glucose meter is, let's say someone like me, random, throws a glucose meter on. Do I just like throw the results into ChatGPT and ask like what to do? Or is there some risk to just kind of, putting a glucose meter on? And also, like, for example, like I'm in the States and you could throw a rock and get a GLP-1 like in 2 days, like mailed to your house. And so there is a lot of like Google medical school type thing going on here. And so, but how can we use glucose meters responsibly and get good information from them if we're a lay person, or can we?
Yes, you can buy one. In Canada, you can buy them over the counter at a pharmacy. In the US, you can order consumer versions for non-diabetics online. So they're not difficult to get. Interpreting the data, though, I would say is a bit more nuanced. So it depends on, ChatGPT, when I use it, because I talk a lot about this stuff, is actually quite accurate. But I don't know if you're throwing in your data, if it would be, because I think I've trained mine for my paradigm. So there are a few cautions with it. One of the biggest cautions is that a lot of women putting on a continuous glucose meter. So let me just describe what it is first. It's a device that you wear on the back of your arm, usually for 2 weeks, that measures your blood sugar continuously all day and all night. So it's an incredible tool for seeing how your food is affecting you and whether any of the symptoms that you're experiencing in terms of energy swings, mood swings, sleep disruption might be related to your blood sugar. So in the US, it's a little bit easier because the consumer models do have a narrower reference range for a non-diabetic. But one of the big cautions I have is that it's very easy to just become afraid to eat carbohydrates, because a carbohydrate will cause a glucose rise. And then you'll say, oh, well, if I don't eat carbs, then I'm fine. And that's not great for the long run. It might feel great initially, but women need carbohydrates. And I would much rather you exercise more and eat carbohydrates than to cut them out and be sedentary. Over time, especially if you still have a period, it will cause some hormone disruption. And this is something that I see a lot because women often are restricting too much, either too low carb, too low calorie, or doing too much fasting. And that causes something called metabolic stress, where you slow down your metabolism. The side effect that bring people to me is usually the hair loss and the fatigue. So if you slow down your metabolism too much, you end up slowing down your thyroid hormone conversion, and there are some predictable signs of that. It doesn't happen right away. Right away, you feel great because you're not having these blood sugar swings, but over time, that's not a sustainable practice. So that's one caution that I have, because ultimately what you want to learn with a glucose meter is, what is the portion size of carbohydrate you tolerate well? Which ones does your body do best with? And what time of day is it better to have them? But we don't want to drop our carbohydrates too low for too long, because that, again, is going to cause some consequences. The second caution with it is again, I do think you need some help in interpreting the data. So I do teach this in my courses. I'm actually sort of transforming my metabolic mastery program to be in 3 parts. So there will be a separate CGM module on its own, which is basically walking you through how to use one responsibly and what to look for so that you're getting some usable information. Because for me, it's just as important that you record the meals and snacks that are great for your blood sugar as it is to notice the ones that are not good. You want to develop a long repertory of glucose-friendly meals, right? So, when I use my glucose-friendly meals are like top of mind all the time. So, turkey burgers with quinoa and a salad, perfect meal. Chickpea pasta with a meat sauce and a side salad, perfect meal. I'm actually quite good with white rice as long as I don't overdo the portion size and have enough protein and veggies. Some people aren't. And I know the portion size of carbohydrate with a meal, depending on the time of day and how sedentary I am. on a day that I sit all day long and I'm at my screen like this for hours and hours, I can't tolerate much carbohydrate at lunchtime unless I go for a walk. It causes a blood sugar rise and then a dip, and then that 3 o'clock exhaustion hits where the brain fog comes on. So I change my lunch meal depending on how active I can be. Obviously, it's better to go for a walk and eat the carbohydrates, but on days where I've overbooked myself, I don't eat a lot of carbohydrates midday when I'm sitting.
Mhm. So it just gives you a lot of information, and then you can tweak because every body is different, I'm assuming. Hmm.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Everybody's different. And then when you add in exercise, you're going to have to tweak it again because I'm a big fan of fueling your workouts, meaning having something to eat before you start and then making sure that you replenish with your protein and carbohydrates also if it's an endurance session after the workout, because that's going to keep you stable for longer as well. So there's a lot of trend of fasted workouts. And I don't feel like women's bodies respond very well to that, especially in the long run as well. And you're going to feel better if you eat something first too. Like it's going to
Yeah.
feel like you've got, the energy to get through it as well.
What role does chronic stress play in metabolic dysfunction? Hmm.
Big one. So again, it's something that sometimes you can see with a glucose meter. You can see your blood sugar go up when you haven't eaten anything. So when cortisol goes up, it raises glucose. So if you're turning on a cortisol response chronically through the day or the night, you're going to see more of an elevated blood sugar, regardless of what you eat. So that's actually cool to see that in practice. And again, when your stress is high, chances are you're not making the best choices food wise as well, because a lot of us self-medicate with food to calm ourselves down. Carbohydrates do raise your serotonin and make you feel better, but then that creates a vicious cycle in terms of your stress hormones and your blood sugar response. So it does play quite a big role. But what I like to counsel women on in terms of stress is that our bodies are actually designed to withstand a lot of stress, but we need to build in downtime and relaxation as well. So something that I learned a long time ago in a stress coaching program that I took was that it's not how hard you work, it's how well you rest. So that actually really changed things for me because I'm a very type A doer. And it was refreshing to me to learn that it wasn't about doing less, it was actually just building in the breaks through the day. And that if I had a big push, making sure that there was a weekend that I could recover, freeing up some afters, like, after work hours, like just
Yeah.
allowing the recovery time is kind of the game changer there.
I think that's a really I love that
Yeah.
actually. It's about the rest. I think that's really important. I wear an Aura ring, and this morning and yesterday I had like messages like, it's gonna be okay, Kathleen. It's gonna be okay. Like, have some rest. And I love the messages it gives me because it can show in real time the stress, right? But it also shows the rest, which is amazing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I have an Aura ring too. I love it. It just helps me. Again, I'm a chronic
Mhm.
overdoer, and it helps me to stay
Mhm.
accountable to that or to see when I'm, pushing through things. Uh, and I use it also for training and recovery as well. So I can tell when I'm recovered
Yeah.
from a hard workout and when it's time to go again. And sometimes it takes a couple of days. And in your head, if you're on a high from like pushing yourself, you're not going to really feel that in your body. So it's nice to see the data to just remind me.
Yeah, I love it too.
So, speaking of ways we use to cope with chronic stress, one of those can be alcohol. And at a basic level, what does alcohol metabolically do to our bodies?
Yeah, so there are a lot of impacts of alcohol. Some of it depends on how much you're drinking and the time of day and the frequency of it as well. But the simple way to explain it is that when you drink, your liver prioritizes the metabolism of alcohol first before it makes glucose to keep your blood sugar stable and also before it burns fat. So you're interfering with biological processes every time you put alcohol in first, because it's going to prioritize that processing in advance of everything else. So that's the main reason that there's sleep disruption after drinking, is that your body first prioritizes that alcohol metabolism, and the more you have, the longer it takes. And then what happens is you actually get a blood sugar drop. It's not that it spikes you, it's that it causes a drop because it interferes with your body's processing of glucose to keep your blood sugar stable in the night. And then that's going to create a roller coaster the next day where you're chasing it, where you're going to be craving a lot more carbohydrates and sugar to just like get yourself leveled out again, and feeling more anxious because of it as well. Again, the second phase is that it blocks your fat oxidation. So when you're drinking, you're not burning fat. It's just bypassing it. It's not a priority at that point. And so that can cause a body that's less responsive. The time that we burn fat is in the night. That's our longest fat burning window. And if you're interfering with that with alcohol, you could be doing everything else perfectly through the day. You might be getting your protein, you might be exercising, but you're not getting that window of fat burning in the night that you're aiming for. Again, not everybody struggles with weight while they're drinking, but they are probably impacting their sleep quality and anxiety and food cravings and food choices.
Yeah, when I was drinking, I knew sort of the calories that I was drinking, and so I wasn't, like, overweight when I was drinking because I had such poor nutrition. I was taking in,
Right.
such little amounts of actual nutrition and food, and so, and I do think that this happened to me, but does alcohol become more disruptive in midlife? Is it more noticeable? And so there was sort of an age I hit where it was like it just felt like even though I wasn't consuming more necessarily, it just started to feel like worse and like more of a problem.
There's a lot of reasons actually why it hits harder in midlife. And one of them is that your metabolic health is changing already, right? So if we think of perimenopause and menopause as a metabolic transition, that system's already stressed. And then you throw alcohol into an already stressed system, you're going to feel it more, like the sleep disruption, the anxiety, the blood sugar dips in the night, and the inability to burn fat. Like they're gonna hit harder because they're already an issue with the estrogen change. The other is that when estrogen declines, um, the liver actually struggles a little bit. I find that women have trouble processing a higher fat diet at that time as well. There's more tendency for even a non-alcoholic fatty liver to happen at that window too, when estrogen declines. And I have, several patients where I've had to, reduce the fat intake of their diet because their liver was stressed by it. So again, the liver becomes a bit more vulnerable in that time as well. So the alcohol is going to feel more like a toxin as it is at that time than compared to how you processed it before.
For women in recovery, Shawna, how should we think about sugar cravings from a metabolic perspective?
A really good question. So I know it's extremely common in recovery to crave a lot of sugar, especially in like the early months. And we have to kind of look at this from like a hierarchy. I think at first, if you need sugar to get through an alcohol craving, you just go for it. It's better choice. And I don't actually think putting a lot of rules around that is a good idea because it's going to drive you right back to the alcohol again. So I think in early recovery, I wouldn't put too much focus on it. Is it good for you? Are you going to gain a bit of weight? Probably. And there has to be an end point in terms of letting that run free. But in early recovery, I don't think fighting it is actually a good idea. I think it creates so much pressure that is going to sort of, drive you back to drinking a little bit sooner. Over time, though, that strategy does need to shift. So why do we crave sugar if we quit alcohol? Part of it is looking for reward, and sugar is the quickest way to get a reward in our brain other than drinking. And the second part of it is that your blood sugar's been on a roller coaster for a while, whether you've been aware of it or not, and your body's going to be looking for something to perpetuate the same kind of roller coaster and fill in the gaps. So what we can do over time, so once you're through the initial part and feeling a bit more stable in your sobriety and you have the bandwidth to look at your cravings is I like to take a practical approach of listening to what the body is asking for and seeing if we can do a bit of a sidestep. So for me, a sidestep would be adding a healthier treat that's going to give the brain a feeling of reward, but maybe the body a little less harm. That might be something that is naturally sweetened rather than refined sugar sweetened, but still going to taste really good. So it might be, a muffin or a chocolate chia pudding or something that's sweetened with dates or maple syrup, and having that at the time of day where you tend to crave the most. So it's like saying yes with a boundary and making this part of your plan rather than something that you're trying to willpower against it. This is my strategy with sugar cravings in general, is that we still need pleasure foods in our plan. Food should still be love, but we can do it in a healthier way. And there are tons of ways of making treats that are sweetened well, that are actually more satiating because they have some fiber and whole foods in them. In fact, real foods tend to spike glucose a lot less than processed ones in general. So even making a dessert with real ingredients is less harmful than buying something out of a bag.
Mhm.
So my approach is to honor what the body is asking for. Initially, just let it run for a little while. Don't put any restrictions on it. If you can get off of alcohol and you need some candy or chocolate for a while, I would not stress about it. But there is a point in time where that's going to have to shift. And this is where we do the sidestep. Most people who've been drinking tend to have their cravings in the evening. That's not the best time of the day to be eating a bunch of sugar. But, bringing some mindfulness to an evening snack is probably what I would recommend there. Prepare something that looks and feels pleasurable for yourself. Put it on a plate, pay attention to eating it, make a cup of tea to put with it, or a fancy non-alcoholic drink on the side, whatever it is that you need to feel satiated, both mentally and physically, and enjoy it. The need for that will shift over time. This isn't something that your body's going to want and need forever.
Okay, that's great. I know I did your metabolic mastery program, which was amazing. And one of the things that really shifted, like, I had a full-blown sugar addiction. And when I did that program, for the first maybe week or two, I would have like berries with a little bit of maple syrup and some coconut yogurt, like during when I always craved an evening snack. And then after a couple of weeks, I actually didn't need it at all anymore. Like I didn't crave it. I didn't like it wasn't a rule. I could have it if I wanted to, but I just didn't feel like I needed it. So it really helped shift things over time.
Yeah, I mean, the natural sweeteners are less addictive to the brain. So it's easier to say yes and no to them. Like things with processed sugar and a lot of packaged foods, they're designed to be literally addictive. They fill in the opioid receptors, they act like cocaine. The more sugar you eat, the more you want. So again, that sidestep of giving yourself something pleasurable that is sweetened differently is a lot easier to actually make a decision in the moment. Personally, I love sweets as well. Like this is, I've completely in the past 10 years changed my relationship with eating by this theory of yes with a boundary. I have a treat every single day and it's usually homemade and it's usually, again, my healthified version of something. But because it's just part of my plan, once in a while, if I want the real sugar or the real dessert or the carrot cake from the restaurant, it doesn't throw me off anymore because I still get a treat tomorrow. It's not like that waiting binge, and then you're not allowed to have it afterwards.
Love that. And so with the sugar, how do you feel about, for example, I did this period where I was eating like chocolate that was sweetened with like stevia. So do you think it's better to have something that's like sweetened with dates or maple syrup? How do you feel about that?
Honestly, it depends how much. So I feel like if yeah, so like a chocolate with stevia is going to have a minimal blood sugar response, which is a good thing, but it still tastes very, very sweet. And sometimes that taste feeling of sweet can still create cravings for more sweet. So it really depends on how your body processes it. If it's like a serving a day and it satisfies you, great. But I find that a lot of people get into a lot of healthy treats sweetened with artificial sweeteners and have them multiple times in the day. And that tends not to fare very well in terms of weight and metabolic health in the long run, because that constant sweet taste tends to create more cravings and more cravings. So I don't love it when it becomes excessive like that. And it's very easy to have stevia sweetened things multiple times a day, like the stevia pop, the stevia chocolate. It's in your protein powder. You're making a, you know, a mug dessert or something that's stevia sweetened. And again, once in a day, no big deal. Stevia is pretty great, but multiple times is still kind of fooling your body. So it's mixed.
So, Shawna, walk us through what a realistic first week of improving metabolic health looks like. Is it changing everything at once? Is it making small changes at once? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's actually why I created the program, like the Metabolic Mastery program, is so that we can break it down one step at a time and master it. Because what I was finding is that in my one-on-one practice is that, yes, I can explain exactly what you need to do, and it seems really straightforward and simple, but most people weren't actually doing it. So they needed some more support in terms of implementing each of the steps. I always start with protein first. So upping your protein intake, figuring out how much protein your body actually needs, getting it in 3 meals a day consistently, because this is actually a really hard step to do if you're not used to it. Having protein regularly through the day locks down your blood sugar for longer. You're going to feel more satiated between meals and you're going to have more energy. So I always start with the protein step first. And it might take a few weeks to master that, to just get used to having protein around at lunchtime, to finding a protein meal that you can eat in the morning. Dinners people usually do pretty well with. Myself, it's always the lunch protein. If I don't have something handy, it's just really hard to make it happen. So getting in the habit of having either leftovers from dinner around or, buying easy proteins, having things, because once you have the protein, you can build a meal pretty quickly. So I always start with protein first. Step 2 is adding in daily movement. So before we start taking things away, like restricting carbs and sugars, I like to get the protein and the movement in first. Daily movement is just your steps, getting up regularly through the day, not being as sedentary. What people notice with the glucose meter on is that your blood sugar is very hard to control if you sit all day. Any carbohydrate causes a glucose to rise, and then that starts to affect your cravings, your energy, and your focus. So adding in movement, the most impactful time of the day to move your body is after your meals. So what it does is it literally changes the signaling of what's happening with your blood sugar, so that instead of blood sugar goes up, a little bit goes to your liver and your brain, the rest of it's still circulating, and then your body's going to make some insulin to store it. If we move, we are giving that glucose someplace to go, which goes to our muscles. So this is not burning off your meal. It's just getting the bigger muscles, especially your leg muscles, moving after you eat to change the signaling, so that less of your blood sugar causes a rise and then an insulin spike. So if we can add in even 10 minutes of movement after a meal, ideally 20, for 1 meal a day, maybe for 2 meals a day, it's going to make a huge impact on that blood sugar regulation. The more regulated you are with the protein and the movement, the easier it is to then have the discussion about the sugar and the carbohydrates, because you're in a more stable place. So it's easier to shift those habits once the protein and the movement are in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. I went for a walk after lunch yesterday just because the weather was really nice. And it's like one of the first times I've done it, and it felt really good after. I had a lot of energy. That is,
Yeah, I know you don't have that sugar low in the afternoon.
yeah, that's really interesting.
What types of movement are most effective, would you say, for blood sugar regulation?
They're all important. I like to stage it though. So for me, daily movement comes first. So getting your steps up. And what the science says is that we're ideally aiming for an average of 7,000 steps
Yeah.
a day for health. That's the tipping
Okay.
point. If you're not even close to that, start low. Like, just do an extra 10-minute walk. Get yourself moving for 20 minutes a day. Build up to that gradually. So the daily movement, being less sedentary, is number one. After that, step two is put on muscle. The more muscle you have, the more metabolically healthy your body is. So they call muscle your metabolic sink, meaning it gives your glucose someplace to go. And again, muscle is the organ of longevity. You're going to maintain your independence for longer the more muscle you have. So putting on muscle comes next. Again, where you start is going to depend where you're at. If you've never touched a weight in your life, you're going to start with this gradually. Maybe join an exercise class or start with Pilates with light weights in the beginning to just get your posture and your movement in check. Over time, the studies show that lifting heavy has the biggest impact. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone's joints are able to do that. There are lots of ways of putting on muscle, but that's step two. And then step three is your cardiorespiratory fitness, which is, anything that raises your heart rate is going to have a profound effect on your metabolic health in terms of your blood sugar regulation, your ability to tolerate more carbohydrates, and very dramatically your longevity. It's, your VO2 max, which is a measurement of your cardiorespiratory health, is something that goes down with age. And we have a lot of control over that. So the reason it's important to build it, especially in midlife, so like late 40s, early 50s, is that the higher you get it there at that point, it's going to delay the age at which you're going to need support and assistance as you get older. So let's say it drops, I forget the numbers, maybe 10 points a decade. If you're at, a 40 in your 50s and it drops to a 30 and a 20 and a 10, the age where you're going to need assistance is when your VO2 max goes to around a 16. So we want to keep it higher for longer so that we don't hit that age where we lose our independence. I love that framing of it because, it will go down with age. Even the fittest person in the world is going to have less cardiorespiratory fitness in their 70s. But if we can keep it higher than average, we're maintaining our independence. And I don't know about you, but watching, my parents' age and, trying to shift my own perspective with that has been a huge motivator.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
my grandmother, she passed away when she was 96, but I asked her in the final few years of her life if she could have done anything differently in as she aged, what it would have been, and she told me exercise because
wow.
she just wasn't as mobile. She just wasn't really able to live the kind of life that she wanted to live, and she wasn't able to just even enjoy the things she wanted to enjoy. And she said she never ever prioritized exercise, I will say that. So, but she said that's what she would have done differently.
Cool. I mean, it wasn't a thing then.
No.
Women didn't exercise. That's like part of my mission with Women Who Move is that we need to change that framing. Like we can stay very fit in our 70s even. And, my son asked me that the other day. He says, like, why doesn't grandma exercise? I'm like, it just wasn't a
Yeah,
thing.
and the thing.
Yeah. So, and there's really like, again, you should get a health clearance before you start if you're over 50, but there really aren't a lot of reasons why you can't. And we can adapt any kind of movement depending on ability.
Well, Sonia is the queen of doing laying down exercises. She does love a good workout on the floor.
I love Pilates. I do it there. I do an upper body strength workout that's all lying down that I like try to get in at least once a week when I'm feeling lazy. Like I'll know I'm like, where's that? I'll like look for it. Like I'll be like, where's the laying down one? And it's good because you're doing like
Awesome.
flies and you're doing like
It's
yeah.
true. I know, it's so good.
Yeah. But I
That's great. Yeah, adapt it to where you're at.
yeah.
There's no one way of doing
Yeah.
anything. Like I know online it looks like, you've got to lift heavy and you have to do this and you have to do that. But really, like, you have to love what you do. It's got to light you up. You got to find something that you enjoy I like finding community and people to do things with. It helps because then you get that other layer of, joy and satisfaction with it. Um, yeah, so there's many, many options. And yes, there's maybe a perfect way of doing it, but it doesn't need to be perfect to be health promoting.
Okay, so speaking of that perfect weight, I would say maybe in the last like year or two, prioritized consistency over intensity. And so I have my like lazy day workouts. And so what do you think is more important? Is it the consistency, or am I doing it wrong? Should it be the intensity? Should I just like on the days I'm feeling it, should I just go hard? And on the days I'm not, should I just like feel like doing anything?
Yeah, so I love that actually, because that's something I say a lot is flexible consistency, because it's a lot easier to maintain a habit than it is to build a new one. And exercise is funny that when you stop doing it, it's very hard to get back on. Even myself, if I don't work out for 3 days, I want to sit on the couch. I don't want to do it the next day. So even somebody who is athletic will get that feeling if you take a break. So it's better to adapt what you do, so that it's consistent over time and you've built a really solid habit. In terms of, how much intensity, my rule of thumb for women, especially over 40, is that you only want 2 intense sessions per week anyways, right? It's not supposed to be every day. So for me, I'm a track runner. So my intensity is on the track. And I have my 2 sessions, Monday and Thursday night. And for those ones, I push as close to all out as I can. The rest of the week are not intense sessions. In all of my, my strength, my mobility, my easy runs, they are moderate to low intensity. And I also give myself permission to have down days or totally shift the workout if I need to, so that I can do my 2 intense sessions that week, because that's my priority. So women who are not athletes often think that we're supposed to just continuously push hard every single week. But if you ever get a coach for anything, and especially if you're over 40, they build in deload weeks or down weeks every 3 to 4 weeks. So what that means is that your training program gets modified maybe every 3rd week if you're over 50, to be much lower intensity, lower duration, lower impact. And that's how you progress. For me, that was a huge light bulb moment. Like as soon as I told myself I was an athlete, I actually got more downtime.
That makes sense. Yeah, now that you're saying it. Yeah, once you tell yourself you're an athlete, you're like, "Oh, I have to build in this downtime because it's so important." But yeah.
Yeah.
What's your definition, Dr. Daru, of high intensity? Because
Yeah.
like that might be different for you than what
Oh,
it is for me.
I don't think I have a high intensity. I think all mine is medium. Like my max is a
Me too.
medium.
I
Yeah.
feel like
Um, so high intensity is relative. It depends where your fitness is. So, for somebody who doesn't run, a walk run for 20 minutes is high
yeah.
intensity. For me, that's a low intensity day. So it builds as your focus does. So it really depends on what your goals are. If you've plateaued with your workouts, you probably do need to up the intensity once or twice a week, right? If you're just maintaining right now and you haven't progressed in terms of what you can lift or how you feel at the end of a workout or how much of yourself you bring to it, then it probably is the time to progress so that you're actually putting on more muscle mass or, improving your fitness. There is a point that it's okay to coast as well, right? If you're happy with where your base fitness is at. But we don't build our fitness. We'll plateau at a certain point without an occasional push, but it's relative.
Okay.
So, it's I guess we would call it your level of relative exertion. So if you're pushing yourself to what you think is 80% of your max in any session, I would call that a high intensity session. It's not so much what you're doing at that
When you
time.
say max, though, what are the metrics? Are you looking at like heart rate? So yeah, I will sometimes check out my heart rate to see what is like my maximum intensity? Is it like I can't hold a conversation while I'm doing it, or like how do I know that I'm near my max?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you're doing a cardio workout, yes, it's heart rate related, because you can measure that and you can know where your sort of training zones are and you can be in that range. So, for a woman in her 40s or 50s, her maximum heart rate might be 180 or so, maybe a little bit lower, a little bit higher. And, her high intensity zone might be anything over 155. So that would be an example. But if you're doing strength or you're doing a HIIT workout or you're doing, a really hard hot Pilates class, it's going to be your relative exertion, which again is probably the point where you can't have a conversation anymore, where you could just like, breathe out a word here and there. It's easier to define low intensity, like your zone 2, because that's where you can have a conversation, and still catch your breath between sentences. That's like a walking pace or a walking up a hill pace or an easy bike ride type of thing. So yes, if we want to build our fitness for, again, longevity, we do want to be pushing our bodies, but we want to have a good base of fitness for at least 3 to 6 months before you start adding some intensity in, because you're more likely to, get overtired or get injured or not feel great afterwards.
I don't think I ever hit high intensity. Or I don't
No?
know. I don't know. Maybe if I'm doing treadmill like uphill. Um,
Mhm.
but like not with Pilates, not with like me. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's also the concept. So I have a friend who works out a lot and she always talks about like working out like with weights to failure and like what the definition of failure, like working to failure is. And so she says that so she'll do like 10 to 12 reps and like by the end she's hitting failure, and that's like how she knows she's at the weight that she wants to be at. So I don't know. I don't, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I ever hit it, but maybe I should try harder.
Well, I mean, let's sort of put it back down though. Like the most important thing is regular movement. And yes, if we want to optimize things in terms of, putting on more lean muscle and being the most fit we can, we're going to have to go to failure. You're going to have to get into those high zone workouts. But you can be in very good health and never reach that point and stay moderate forever and ever. It kind of depends what your goals are. I like testing and assessment because we can get a bit of a reality check on, are you doing enough? So 2 tests that I will often recommend for people, one of them is a DEXA scan to look at your muscle mass, basically. A DEXA scan is a low intensity X-ray that looks at all of body composition. So you can see bone density, muscle mass, body fat, visceral fat, that type of thing. I could care less about body fat. I do care about visceral fat, the fat around the organs, and I care a lot about muscle and bone density. So we can get a gauge of how you are compared to an average woman of your age, and is there maybe a need to put on more muscle because you're at risk of, being under muscled, and that puts your bone density at risk. It's a very easy thing to track over time. I like to do these every year or two, um, partly as a motivator to stay fit because I like good
Yeah.
results, but also because at my age, I'm at high risk of losing muscle and bone density, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want it to happen without me noticing that there's been a shift. The second is you can measure your cardiorespiratory fitness with a VO2 max test, which is offered at a lot of gyms or physio studios, which is a test where you're on either an exercise bike or a treadmill, your choice, depending on what you think you'd do better at. And they put a mask on that you're breathing out of. So it's measuring your oxygen capacity while you do a cardio workout. And we can see where you line up there. So maybe your fitness is actually quite good with hill walking on a treadmill, and you actually don't need to do more. Maybe you're already at a great level with where you're at, or maybe you're actually not, and you should be pushing harder. And I find that that's not exactly predictable. I've had patients who only walk, who have pretty great fitness. And yes, they could do better, but they're already at a good level. Do they need to do more at this phase in their life? It's optional. And then I have others who've been surprisingly low, and it's having a huge impact on their energy levels. And in those cases, we do build a targeted fitness plan to improve it.
hmm So it's really kind of, again, individual, like finding out where you're at, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we have
But starting with daily movement is
Mhm.
key. Like, if you do nothing else, like moving your body on a regular basis is like, that's 80% of it. And the rest is like a 20% bonus.
Okay, that's good to remember. That is good to remember. Just moving your body on a daily basis is 80% of it.
Yeah.
One final question, Dr. Giroux, and then we will wrap up. But what is the one message you would like women in midlife to hear about their bodies and what is possible?
Ooh, this is a juicy question. Okay. So, number one, you're not going crazy. Your body is
Mhm.
changing. So, that's my number one message. Yes, the rules all changed, but there is a roadmap. It's not all about estrogen. It's a big piece of it, but it's not all of it. And there is a strategy to get through. Your metabolic health is like the key that unlocks it. So getting your blood sugar in check is the key to thriving through perimenopause and menopause and getting your body moving. There is no reason that we can't stay fit. We can't challenge ourselves. We can't break records even at any age. And if you can find something that lights you up with joy to move your body, whatever that is, that's the direction to go.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's a beautiful way to end. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've learned I always learn so much from you. So
God.
thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I always love talking about this stuff. I'm sorry if I jumped around a lot,
Oh.
but there's so many things I wanted to say.
No, not at all. And thank you all for joining us for Sisters in Sobriety. And we will see you next week.